For now, we'll deal with this later. All right, looks like we're recording. So welcome everyone. It's the Velero community meeting, March 17th, 2020. Hope everyone's doing all right, staying safe. All right, well, let's just jump into it. So we've got some status updates to start, and then a few different discussion topics. Now I know Ashish is first here on the status updates. I know he had to run to a personal appointment, so I don't think he'll be available. I know some of the stuff he has on here around the CSI Snapshot work, Nolan is going to cover a little bit as well. So I think we'll just skip over his topics for now, and Nolan can cover what he has information on. So yeah, I'm up next. So last week I got 1.3.1 shipped on Tuesday with a small bug fix for backups. Haven't heard any further issue reports from that, so hopefully things are going all right there. I also finalized the blob chunking code for Azure that I talked about last week. I finished up testing and pushed that out for review, so I think that's ready. Carlisia had one comment on the documentation, which I've addressed, so should be ready for another look and hopefully a merge there. And then I've also started looking at the issue that we were discussing last year around kind of having a two-stage process for snapshots, where the first step is creating the snapshot, the local snapshot, and then the second step is some form of either waiting for the snapshot data to replicate off to durable storage or actually triggering that upload of data. So we had a contributor from OpenEBS who had started to put together a design doc there, but I'm sort of picking that up again and hoping to at least get some thoughts down on paper and start to get input from the relevant folks there. So I'll be continuing to work on that this week. I'm also on community support this week, so it's keeping me a little bit busy, though it hasn't been too burdensome so far.
Quick question on that, Steve.
Yeah.
Is Velero doing that transfer on the table? So is Velero being responsible for shipping the snapshot to whatever location? Is that an option that you're exploring?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I really haven't gotten into it much yet, but you know, I think there's a potential that some of that code lives in Velero and there's some sort of interface or plug-in mechanism to allow folks to plug in specific data movers. But I would sort of like to consider the full spectrum from, you know, just a very passive model where we're just maybe pulling a plug-in to, you know, ask if the snapshot's been replicated yet, kind of all the way to the other side of the spectrum where Velero is very actively kind of triggering data move events. So. Yeah, and hope to get input from anyone who's interested there. And you know, we definitely need to consider both the kind of public cloud use cases as well as the more on-prem use cases, because the models are definitely different there. So more to come. Hope to be able to spend some time on this week. Any other questions for me? All right, Carlisia, you're up next.
All right, so I made updates to the CLI PR, and it's in a very good shape for review now. It's missing 2 items, which are to add some CLI alternatives, and also the way that the Velero server behavior as startup will change. So I'm working on those now. What I have added, what's there now is I addressed all the code reviews. I added some suggestion for being able to have multiple secrets, which we don't do right now, and with some YAML examples. The broken down YAML files are there with the customized files, so we can see how the output will look like. I added the text for suggesting the reasoning for renaming the provider term with plugins. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks. And I'll definitely try to spend some time reviewing that again, hopefully today.
Cool.
All right, if there are no other questions there, I'll hand it off to Nolan.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna do my update in reverse order. So Ashish mentions he had 3 of these CSI snapshot issues that we talked about in the CSI snapshot meeting on Monday this week. I mistakenly thought we were going to talk about them in the data protection working group last week. They actually asked us to move it to the snapshot discussion yesterday. And through a discussion, the middle one, the one-to-many, there's workarounds for that Ashish and I had talked about, but there was some reticence to fix that, or at least explore that, because there's security implications for how, and some implementation. And then the other 2, I think we will be exploring with the CSI Snapshot folks what we can do to fix this, and if it will get fixed. But this all kind of shook out of Velero trying to implement and work with these versus someone trying to work with them directly. I am working, Ashish has also been working on getting restores working with, so he had demoed backups and restores last week. We merged the restore work yesterday, I think. And I know he's got some proposals for cross namespace restores that will not work quite the same way as namespace remapping in Velero currently. We have a separate issue for that where we're going to do in a separate PR. And then I am working on a separate PR that's in Velero Core to upload the CSI resources associated with a backup into Object Store, so that we can show those snapshots in client output. So if you do Velero backup describe, you can see them. And possibly so we can do imports on backup sync. So when you sync in Velero backups, you can sync in VolumeSnapshotContent at least. So that PR is in draft. Mostly I need to actually test it out, pull in all of Ashish's changes and start testing that integration. And then finally, Ashish and I are doing an internal talk this week. So he and I are working on preparing the slides and demos for that.
Awesome, sounds good. And yeah, if you want any more eyes on the testing, when you're ready, feel free to reach out. I've at this point, I'd like to get an environment up and running and actually do some testing and playing around with the plugin, and can do the same for the work you're going to do.
Yeah, I need to set up an environment similar to Ashish's. That's the code that I have all compiles, but I haven't tested actually like generating a backup and getting with the updated code. I haven't tested getting the full backup generating CSI objects, which would then get shipped up to Object Store. So I don't know that actually functions.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone have any questions or comments for Nolan? All right. I see Raphael added an update here, so I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Steve. It's very quick. This is a request that I made to myself. I'm just bringing to everybody's attention, to the external community, the proposal of those additional labels on the backup CRD. And those are 3 additional labels, one for major version of Kubernetes, the minor version, and what they call GitHub version, which is a more complete version. I'm just bringing to everybody's attention if anyone has a better idea or any other thoughts about those additional labels. The idea behind the labels is eventually put some logic to facilitate the transformation of API groups for skip level migration of Kubernetes.
Cool. And these will go on the backup custom resource, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for the update. Anyone have any questions? All right. Well, I think we can move on to the discussion topics then. I've got the first one here. Yesterday I was talking with Dave Smith-Uchida about the vSphere plugin that his team has been working on. And one thing that they are interested in doing is writing some data to basically into object storage. And he's sort of trying to figure out what the most appropriate place to put that data is. So it comes out of a VolumeSnapshotR plugin. And so what I talked about with him was adding a new top-level directory to the bucket that Velero uses. So right now we have within that bucket, we have backups, we have restores, we have restic, and I think we have metadata. I think those are the 4 directories. So we talked about adding a 5th directory that's allowed there called plugins. Which would basically be a place where any plugin could then create a further subdirectory and write whatever arbitrary data it's interested in writing there. So basically, just wanted to bring this up with folks and see if they had any thoughts on this. The reason that there's actually a code change required here if we want to support this is because we have some validation code at Velero server startup time that essentially looks at the contents of the bucket or the prefix within the bucket that you have configured for your backup storage location, and it basically errors out if you have any directories in there that don't match the set of allowed directories. So if we wanted to allow this plugins directory, we'd have to make, I think it's a 1-line code change to basically add this to the kind of allowed directories list. So I'll pause there. Does anyone have any thoughts on that or any questions?
I thought we had an escape hatch that anyone could add an exception to this validation. Is that not true? So I thought there was a field on backup storage locations that you could append an exception, but maybe I'm misremembering.
That's not something I remember, but
okay.
We're double checking. I guess the other thing to add here is that I think that in this case, the data that's going to be uploaded is somewhat similar to kind of the restic repository data, where you can't just very clearly separate it and put an individual file within a specific backup subdirectory, because that would be another option in some cases. This is more kind of a general collection of data and metadata that spans across various backups, so it needs kind of a single location where it can go.
So, sorry, Nolan. No, so inside the plugins directory, we would have a subdirectory that would match one subdirectory per backup. Would there be an association between what's in there to each particular backup?
Not necessarily. I think it would be up to the plugin author to decide how to organize the data. But what I was envisioning here was, so we'd have the plugins top level directory. Then for this one, which is a vSphere plugin, there'd basically be a subdirectory under plugins called vSphere volume snapshot or whatever, whatever name. And then under that, the plugin author can organize things however they want.
Okay.
I don't see a huge issue with this. I know Dave had asked me about this at KubeCon, and tangentially, I think Andy a while back had one day, I think he was sitting there saying, I want to be able to cross communicate between my plugins. And he had opened up an issue saying he wanted to have like Redis to in the deployment to talk between all the plugins, but that's just kind of sitting there in the backlog. We never really did anything with that. So I don't see any problems with this, provided we make, I don't know how we enforce it, but plugins should only work in their directory or in their prefix. But other than that, seems completely reasonable to me.
Yeah, and I don't, just to respond to that, I don't know if there's, any way that we can enforce that. I mean, right now the plugin could modify, could basically, the plugin is going to have access to the bucket. And so, that the plugin uses the same IAM credentials to connect to it. And so, they can change data in kind of any way.
Right. Unless we only exposed it through the Velero persistence. So we have our persistence layer, the package. If we exposed it through that, we could make it a little bit smarter and say, hey, you're this plugin trying to access some other prefix. You can't do that. But that would require some extra architecting too.
Yeah. Carlisia, do you want to jump in?
So just so we wouldn't be, when the user wants to download a backup, we wouldn't do anything with the contents of that directory.
Not currently, no.
Okay.
So sort of as a parallel, the Velero backup download command also does not download restic data, which I think we've had enhancement requests from some folks saying that it should, but as of right now, Velero backup download is basically limited to metadata in Kubernetes YAML, as opposed to actual snapshot contents or backup contents, volume backup contents, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll maybe add a few more comments to the issue, but if anyone else has any other thoughts here, let me know. All right, let's see, do we have Mayank on the call? Do you want to cover your topic here?
Yes. So basically, this one is restore item action, so which clear selected node annotation in PVC during restore. So we are having this for our local PV based storage engine, but I thought maybe we can add it to Velero, so maybe it can help other audiences, other users also. So in this, I'm using the config map for node mapping.
Okay, so there's a config map. Does it define a mapping from one node to another?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm also checking if node exists or not.
Okay.
Yeah, so sort of adding it to Velero upstream, or maybe we can have different repo for plugin.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I haven't had a chance to look through this in detail. Based on what I understand so far, it seems like something that would be upstreamable. I mean, I think of it as kind of fairly similar, fairly analogous to our storage class remapping plugin, which we have in Tree. I think we can take a look at it and let you know if we have any concerns or questions about it. But otherwise, I don't see any reason why we couldn't upstream this.
And one more thing. So during that storage class mapping, I saw a few comments in PR that maybe we can have a different repo for this restore item action, because adding it to Velero upstream, it will be too much, right? Means for other action also, there will be some restore plugin, restore item action.
Yeah, I mean, it can certainly be packaged up in its own plugin image and basically be optionally added that way. I mean, we do have a certain set of plugins that are in the Velero repo, and those are generally just ones that we think are, commonly useful, applicable to pretty much any user of Velero. So, I think this one potentially falls in that category, but if we decide we don't want it in the main repo, we could always still have it as an optional sort of add-on plugin in its own repo or image.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions on this? All right, so give us, I'd say, a couple of days to just have a chance to look through this, and we can either ping you on Slack or we can revisit it again next week in the community meeting and decide what our path forward is here. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks for bringing this, and look forward to looking into it a little bit more. All right, well, that covers everything that we have listed in the discussion topics. Does anyone else have anything they want to bring up?
No, there's been a lot of heated discussions on the topic of multi-tenancy lately, but I need to jump to another call, so maybe we can. I'll add it to the agenda for next week.
Okay, sounds good.
Steve, sorry. Yeah, let me just go. Okay, so I had a question regarding the. So right now we've been doing some work with the pre and post hook to take backups of, let's say, like if you have stateful like databases running on your Kubernetes, we found that we can make use of the pre and post hook, let's say, to run some quires commands before the backup, and then do the enquires with the post hook. So we find right now we're trying to see how we can have some. So let's say if you're running multi-cluster database deployments with, let's say, master and a couple of slaves, we want to have an ordered way in which we have Velero do the backup of the pod, so that in case, let's say, we might want to first take a backup of the PVCs that are being used by, let's say, like the master pod. So in that case, we want to have Velero execute the backup of that pod first before the other pods. So basically, my question was, with Velero, how can we have kind of like more granular control of the order in which the pods are being backed up? Is there a way we can do that with the hook as they are right now, or what other mechanism can we use so that we can say, okay, take a backup of this pod, of these pods in this order? Also for the restore, do you have any ideas on how that can be achieved?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't think we really have the mechanisms that we would need to control order at that level. We have some ordering in terms of the resource types, but right. If you're saying I want to back up, this pod before this other pod, I can't think of any way that you could do that through the existing mechanism. So it would probably, require an enhancement to Velero to be able to support that. I don't know if anyone else has any ideas.
And so for like a stateful set object, for example, if it has, let's say, n number of pods, how does Velero, what order? Is there a way we can, is it like determined? Can it be easily determined what the order will be in terms of how they're backed up?
I think right now it's non-deterministic. I mean, I think it's, we're basically making a list call to the API server, and whatever order things come back in is the order that we'll back them up in. Right. I mean, we could look at doing something special or unique for stateful sets, because ordering, is relevant there, where we, you know, alphabetize the pods, and that would put the pods in the, you know, in the appropriate order. But I don't know that would really be a sufficient general solution. So we might need to look at having a way for users to specify order in cases where they need to. Did you have any thoughts on how you might want to specify order in this case?
At this point in time, not really. You know, we've just been playing around with the execution hooks, the post and the pre-hook. And for that, we found if you have like a single cluster deployment, just a master or just one node, you know, that works okay for us. But just for the multi-cluster deployments is when we are trying out to see how we can have more control of the order. So right now it's still, you know, very early on, and we're still looking into ways we can do this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, definitely happy to keep discussing it, but right now I don't think we really have the ability to do this well.
Yeah, so I think maybe I can just file an issue, and then from there we can try and brainstorm there. Yeah,
that sounds good. And I'd say we're definitely interested to hear kind of the results of as you're trying this with some different workloads, seeing, you know, what works and where you're running into issues. We'd love to kind of have that knowledge. So feel free to share if you can.
Okay, sure, we'll do. Thanks.
Yep, thanks. Does anyone else have anything they want to cover?
I have a question for Dylan Murray. I know your team's working on the custom cert support. I'm just curious where they're at with that.
Yep. So I think Sam Lucidi is on the call. Sam, do you want to give an update on where you're at there?
Am I audible?
Yeah, a little quiet.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm in the middle of figuring out the best way to get that certificate bundle onto you know, basically onto the pods. The puzzle I'm trying to figure out right now is that both the plugins and the Restic package need access to this certificate bundle, and you know, they've both got different. The plugins have access to the config on the BSL, and you know, the Restic package has access to the rest of it. So just working out the best way to share that between the two of them. And yeah, that's where I'm at the moment.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you have questions, feel free to open a PR with where you're at, and you can ask questions where you're stuck, and we can chime in.
Great, I appreciate it.
All right, thanks for the update. Last call for any further topics. All right, well, I think we can wrap up. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you again next week on March 24th. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.